Hey everyone, so I actually have exclusive content for a change, which is a huge relief because YouTube's algorithm really sucks, and if I have to keep making the same shit as everyone else, I'm gonna lose it. Anyway, I'm having a hard enough time expressing my own opinion and not getting sucked into the ocean of darkness and chaos by doing the same thing as everyone else. So this week, in some exciting developments, I was selected to review an early copy of the Indie Roadhouse film, Hundreds of Beavers, a movie that promises and delivers hundreds of beavers. And I guess I'm going to tell you guys why you should watch this movie, especially if you like silent movies, the Donkey Kong series, or Dragon Quest. Okay, so no cap, this ended up being one of the funniest movies I've seen all year, and I'll include all of 2023 in that year because 2023, real downer of a year. Every movie was like Heisenberg, Oppenheimer blowing up the world. Anyway, honestly, this movie is a real work of art. And it's not a perfect movie, but it does get really close. Okay, actually, it's almost perfect. It only has two technical flaws, and I'll talk about that later. Otherwise, it almost gets there and does what it sets out to do. So Hundreds of Beavers is a really hard film to describe because it honestly has a very basic plot. Like in a nutshell, it's an old-fashioned silent film like from 100 years ago, and it's about a fur-trapping man in a forest full of snow, and he has to kill hundreds of beavers. Oh yeah, and since this movie is pretty much explicitly from start to finish about the murder of animals, to make that a little bit more palatable for a modern audience, every single animal in this film is a man in a furry costume. So yeah, if you hate furries, then you are gonna love this movie because this is a furry slaughter fest. It's just furries getting massacred left and right. Yo, yeah, you're gonna see some dead furries in this movie. Anyway, so yeah, the first act of this film is pretty much Looney Tunes. Like, from the start, there's some major Looney Tunes nonsense happening, which is great because I think it would be really cool if there was a wacky Looney Tunes movie coming out. And this is a wacky Looney Tunes movie coming out, but it's not a real wacky Looney Tunes movie coming out. Anyway, I just wish there were more Looney Tunes style movies coming out, and maybe that is something I should be talking about later. But yeah, anyway, back to the Beavers. Yeah. This was a very funny, very enjoyable movie. And I should point out that I wasn't expecting that because when I originally heard the buzz around this movie and I saw the trailer, I kind of thought this was going to be a weird psychological thriller movie, kind of like the movie Pi or that one where DiCaprio got mauled by a bear. I originally thought based on the trailer, this was going to be about some Canadian hockey player freezing to death and hallucinating all these hundreds of nightmare beavers. But no, this is not scary at all. This is not a horror film. This is actually a funny, family-friendly movie. Now, the movie isn't rated because it's an indie, but if it was, I would say it's probably a PG movie or, hell, even a European G movie. And I really have to stress European in that because you can definitely show your kids this movie and they definitely won't be scarred for life by it. Hell, they might even like it, but there are definitely several scenes where the main character gets his clothes blasted off like dynamite. And it's honestly very reminiscent of old Mr. Bean episodes. But yeah, otherwise, this is a straight start to finish, hilarious, brand new silent comedy film. And yeah, let's discuss that because it's kind of weird that the Charlie Chaplin style silent film genre is suddenly having a resurgence this year. Now, Charlie Day also just put out a movie a few months ago called Fool's Paradise. And that movie was literally a Charlie Chaplin movie, but set in modern day LA where Charlie Day was playing Charlie Chaplin. But while that movie was very much a homage to Chaplin, it borderline tried to convince you that a silent film couldn't work in 2024. And Hundreds of Beavers essentially proves that thesis wrong by literally doing it, and doing it successfully. Hundreds of Beavers has really cracked open the formula of what makes a black and white silent film funny, and they've successfully done it in 2024. Now, Hundreds of Beavers is not just a straight throwback black and white silent movie. It's actually something completely brand new. It's like an evolution mutation of that. And what changes it immensely is it takes that and it adds in incredibly strong video game logic because it's not a normal silent film. As much as this film is influenced by Charlie Chaplin, it's actually something different than that. It's really, really hyper specific. And what this movie reminded me the most of was the Super Nintendo Donkey Kong trilogy. In fact, if I had to be even more specific, I would say this movie very, very strongly resembles a nightmare remembrance of Donkey Kong Country 3. But for the sake of this video, I'm also going to bring up the original Donkey Kong Country because that was the one where Donkey Kong fought hundreds of beavers. But yeah, it's weird, man. Like, this movie is like the movie Charlie Chaplin would have made if you sent a Super Nintendo back to 1912 and made him play Donkey Kong Country. Like, this is a movie that I don't think I've ever seen before in my life because it really resembles more of like a YouTube long play of like a person playing a video game, except it's not a video game, it's a movie. But because this movie uses such high levels of hyper-specific video game logic, specifically the hyper-specific logic loops out of Donkey Kong Country 3 in such a weird hyper-specific way, it's mind-blowing. I was shocked it worked, and it does work. And it really improves the film in such a way that if you're familiar with these logic loops, you'll start to expect what they're doing and where they're going with it. Like, the movie has these full sequences inspired by like the Donkey Kong Country like logic loops. And it's kind of weird because like in our like recent era, people have gotten used to like watching long play YouTube videos of like people playing video games, and it showed that people will put up with that. So this movie is sort of based on that in a crazy way that I've never seen anyone pull off before. It even has the actual sequences that are like presented in 2D side scrolling like an old Super Nintendo video game. And on top of that, it also has an in-game map like it's freaking, again, Donkey Kong Country. Like, the actual mysteries that the movie presents you with also don't make sense at first, but then by the end of the movie, I realized that they didn't make sense because they were like literally Legend of Zelda style logic puzzles, and you have to think of them that way for them to add up. Like, so minor spoilers for the film. Throughout the movie, the beavers are building a thing, and it gets to the point where Gene Kayak like passes the place where the beavers are working every couple of minutes as he's doing his grind loops, and I got really invested in that to the point where I actually rewound the movie because I wanted to double check what the beavers were doing on that particular loop because I was just like so invested in this. Anyway, it eventually climaxes in this absolutely absurd finale where Gene Kayak finally confronts the hundreds of beavers. And yeah, from start to finish, this film is an utterly amazing ride. I was also super impressed at the way the film is borderline an animated film in some places because of how heavily and densely composited the shots are. This film is kind of amazing because they filmed it against a snowfield and then they used the snowfield to like green screen out shit. But then it also like will cut to like some real shots where they just filmed in the forest. And it's really amazing the way it bounces back and forth between like real stuff and absurd cartoon stuff. And there's like no loss of fidelity as it goes back and forth in that. Also, since the movie is mostly silent, I have to really praise that the sound effects and the music were completely on point. In fact, I thought the music was great. It gets really good towards the climax of the film. And once again, because it's kind of based on video game logic, I have to tell you guys that the music to this movie sounded so much to me like Dragon Quest VII. I don't know who made the music for this movie, but they earned their pay because this felt like just Dragon Quest music to me. All right, so now that I've done praising all the great things about this movie, I will address the film's only two flaws. Here are the only two things that keep this film from being absolutely perfect, and they're honestly pretty minor gripes. So at the start of the film, there's like this 2-minute long, halfway animated sequence that just establishes Gene Kayak's backstory that he was originally like an apple whiskey farmer before he became a fur trapper. And the animation here is really bad. It's the worst in the film. It's chaotic and it's super below quality for everything that comes after it. So it's just kind of really weird that they didn't cut this part. Like, the animation at the start of the film is somehow extra hard to stomach. And I don't know what they did wrong with this first scene, but it bothered me in a way that the rest of the film didn't. I think this scene is bad because it contains really badly animated people, and after the scene, any other time you see additional people, the people are real actors. The only other mistake I can point out is there's this part in the film about midway through where Kayak confronts a pack of wolves, and before you see the wolves, you just see their eyes, and the eyes are just like composite on the forest. But there's a few shots where they messed up the composite and it looks fake, which is weird because literally all the other visual effects in the film are perfect. So yeah, if they can fix these two things in the future, I'd say this movie would be completely perfect. Otherwise, yeah, the first 2 minutes of this movie are rough, and if you're watching at home, fast forward past that part, and if you're seeing it in the theater, just buy some popcorn and show up to the theater 2 minutes late. That's the best you can do. Anyway, that's about as much I can say about Hundreds of Beavers without getting deep into spoilers and really ruining the plot. And the plot here is basic. He just kills hundreds of beavers. Find out how. Anyway, yeah, comedy and films are really, really dying in America lately as a genre, and I have to chalk that up to the combination of Hollywood no longer creating bankable young movie stars, especially not in the comedy category. Like, there's a few young leading men, but no like new Eddie Murphy. You know, like Eddie Murphy like became famous when he was 19. He made Beverly Hills Cop when he was like 21, and no one's doing that now. On top of that, with like the superhero genre boom, that like kind of demolished like low to mid-tier comedy genre movies, like, because now everyone just expects like high concept spectacle when you go to the movies. That's why the only majorly financially successful comedy franchise to get off the ground in the past decade has been the Ted series, because Ted himself is a high concept spectacle. Otherwise, you take the bear away, you're just getting the same jokes you get on Family Guy since 1996, only in live action. Anyway, I'm saying Hundreds of Beavers works despite the fact it's an indie movie, because from start to finish, this is a high concept spectacle and it is stunning. Anyway, if you guys want to see Hundreds of Beavers yourself, it is unfortunately a roadshow film, which means it's playing randomly in different cities across the countries once a week, completely randomly. So to see the full schedule of where it's playing, you have to go to hundredsofbeavers.com, #watch, and see when it's going to be in your town. So I happen to live in New York City, so I can tell you guys that it's coming to New York City on February 28th. It's going to have a big premiere at the IFC Film Center, and I think there might be an appearance by the cast and crew at that one. Anyway, otherwise, it's going to roadshow randomly from now until April. So pretty much any city that has an indie-friendly movie theater might be showing it this spring. Anyway, support your local independent theater, I guess, and go see Hundreds of Beavers. All right, see you guys next time. Yeah, this was cool.